So first off, I'd just like to say hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Naviplan Best Practices for Investment Saving Seasons webinar today. My name is Vanessa Levassa, an application training specialist here at Aviso Wealth, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And of course, joining me again on today's call to present the content for the webinar is the one and only Justin Moulter, Partner Experience Manager at Naviplan. So just before we begin, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. Today I am in Vancouver, and I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And for Toronto, we acknowledge the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations and Métis peoples. Next, just a few housekeeping items to be mindful of during the webinar today. Please note that we have placed all phone lines on mute so we can hear our presenter clearly during the presentation today. For any questions you have, please do use that chat feature shown on the screen there, and we'll go ahead and review your questions during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to your Academy site in the next few business days. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, there will be a quick survey for all of our attendees to participate in there. We highly encourage you to complete this survey and provide your feedback so that we can tailor your future webinar experiences and to provide an opportunity for you to share what content or, other topics of Naviplan you're interested in seeing in some of those future webinars. So with that said, I'll go ahead and pass the ball over to Justin. I just have the kind of agenda lined up here if you want to run through that, Justin. But without further ado, I'll pass that over to you, Justin.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Vanessa. Thank you for having me, everyone. Again, Justin Moulter with InvestCloud here. InvestCloud is the owner of Naviplan. Like Vanessa said, agenda's on the screen right there. So best practices for investment savings seasons, reviewing and interpreting various reports, and then tips on how to determine the best strategies clients should implement. I'll talk about those three kind of at once as part of one conversation. And then once I'm done talking about that, then we'll talk about a couple of the enhancements that have happened since we spoke last a few months ago, and also kind of what's coming in the future. So with that said, thank you, Vanessa. I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen and we will get into it. Share that. Okay, perfect. So first things first, before going too deep into reporting or into strategies or anything like that, let me just kind of set the basis here and just talk about entering savings for accounts in Naviplan here. So the first place I'm going to go is our net worth section, where I enter my accounts in this accounts tab right here. Now, any of these accounts right here, I can go and click the pencil icon, which will expand the details of that account and let me enter more information about that particular account. So in this example here, let me go into John's RRSP, okay? John and Janet Smith are my sample clients for today. Well, my entire hour here is going to be in this sample client right here. They're a middle-aged couple. They're 10, 15 years from retirement. So just to set some context on the reports you'll be seeing later, that kind of thing. So John's RSP, again, pencil icon here opens up expanded details about his RSP. And here our very first tab here is savings strategy. And that's where I can enter the savings that John is saving into his RRSP. Now I can put a percentage amount, meaning a percentage of his salary, or a dollar amount. So whichever information your client gives you, you can do a percentage or a dollar amount right here. Now, one thing about saving strategies that some of you might not know is that you can enter a maximum saving strategy. Now, RSPs, TFSAs, they have maximum allowable contribution amounts. So right here, if I would change the saving strategy to say max, so MAX, I'm typing in max, then Naviplan will contribute the maximum allowable amount to John's RRSP. So Naviplan has the government rules built into it, so it knows not to contribute more than what Canadian government allows you to contribute to an RRSP. So that's one trick you can use. If your client's contributing the max, again, to an RSP, a TFSA, you can put max, like the word MAX in there, and the maximum will be contributed. Now, with that said, if you watch my screen here, I'm going to change the savings amount back to 5% where I had it. So notice how way on the right here, there's this constrained by cash flow box that's grayed out. But then when I retype in the word max and hit enter, then this checkbox becomes available. So this checkbox is only available when I have the word max typed in for the saving strategy. And again, same thing goes for a TFSA, all right? What this means is if I check this box right here, Naviplan will honor the cash flow and it will not contribute more to the RSP than what the cash flow can handle. So in other words, if I tell Naviplan that John is contributing the maximum amount to his RSP, but it's going to create a cash flow deficit, Naviplan will not allow that deficit to happen because of this saving strategy. It will only contribute the amount that it can without causing the deficit. So that's what constrained by cash flow means. Otherwise, if I leave it unchecked, when the maximum amount is contributed to the RSP, if it creates a deficit, it creates a deficit. If not, it doesn't. So that's what that checkbox means, something that, is not talked about very much and we get questions on quite a bit. So wanted to make sure to point that out. Now I'm going to cancel out of here. Hitting cancel will delete any changes I made. It won't save anything. That's one kind of side note to point out is anything at all in Naviplan that you're doing. If I'm in here, I'm making changes, whatever I'm doing in here, you have to hit OK for those changes to save. If I hit cancel, or if I hit this X on the top right, whichever edits and changes I made in here will not save. So we've had some frustrated people in the past who have spent minutes, several minutes, making changes and edits, and then hit the X button, and all of a sudden their changes go away. Well, you have to hit OK. So that's that's the important part there. But again, I'm just hitting cancel just to remove the changes I made before. So the other thing with saving strategies in Naviplan is if I go over here on the left to strategies, this section right here, the very first tab is savings. So this allows me to see all of my saving strategies I have entered. So any non-registered savings strategies will show up here. In my sample plan here, I have nothing, but all of my registered strategies then show up here. So gives me a glimpse and an overview of all of my saving strategies on one screen. And I can edit them, I can change them, I can do whatever I want with them here. So when it comes to entering saving strategies, you can enter them here. Otherwise, like I was showing you before, you can go into net worth and accounts, open up the details of whichever account you want and enter it within the tab here. It does not matter. Either or, you can enter it either spot. It will do the exact same thing. So my point was just that in the strategies section here, you can see all saving strategies in one screen. Okay? So that's how you enter saving strategies. Now, let's talk about the unused room that your client might have for RSP contributions or TFSA contributions. You can see right here, the three saving strategies my clients have is 5% into John's RSP, 3% into Janet's RSP, and then $250 a month into Janet's TFSA. So obviously, none of these saving strategies are the maximum allowable amount to their RSPs or TFSAs. So there's still room for them to contribute more. Now, Naviplan does give you a nice report that shows you any unused room for RRSPs or TFSAs. To see that, I'm going to go up here to quick actions, and then the second from the bottom menu here is the planning assistant. I'm going to click this, and then it's going to take a second to pop up this screen. And then the very right tab here, the very far right tab that says reports, I click that. And then I can select a report from this dropdown right here. So I'll hit the dropdown, and now I can choose to look at either TFSA contribution limits or RSP contribution limits. So I'll choose RSP contribution limits. Now we have a whole table where the first column shows John's current yearly contributions to his RSP. We can see here are his annual contributions that he's contributing right now or plans to contribute moving forward. And here we can see John's unused room. So this tells me there's a lot of room. John has a lot more potential money he could be saving into his RRSP. And same thing for Janet. We can see how much Janet is contributing to RSPs right here. And we can see how much of unused room she has for her RSP contributions. So it gives me a glimpse at all of the extra money that could potentially be saved into those registered accounts. Same thing up here on the dropdown. If I go to TFSA contribution limits, now I can see John and Janet's contributions to TFSAs and any unused TFSA room. So John has no TFSA, so he obviously has the full amount that can potentially be saved. Janet is paying $3,000 or saving $3,000 a month into her TFSA. There's this much leftover room that she can be contributing. So kind of a nice report that it's kind of hidden because it's within the planning assistant. It's not within the quick action reports that you see here. It's actually within the planning assistant. You have to open the planning assistant and then look at the contribution limit report within there. So something again not seen very often, so I wanted to make sure to point that out. So that said, let's talk about some reports here and how we can kind of strategically position savings to better off our clients. So up here in quick actions, those of you on here that are newer, this quick actions menu that my mouse is on right now, that's on the top right of every single page that you are in Naviplan. It does not matter if you're entering in account data, life insurance data, if you're creating scenarios, creating reports, it's always going to be on the top right. And in quick actions here, we have a whole menu of reports. And we have a ton of different report categories, depending on whatever areas you're planning with and whatever modules you have selected. But the intention of these reports are to give you, the advisor, a look under the hood about what's going on in the background, about whichever area you want. If you want to see your client's net worth over time, their cash flow for certain years, if you want to get a breakdown of their retirement goal, their taxes, there's a category for essentially every part of the plan for you to get a deep look into it to kind of figure out what's going on. So those of you that have been on these webinars with me in the past, I never ever go through a webinar without showing the itemized cash flow projection. That's this report right here that my mouse is hovering over. It's in the cash flow category of reports. It's the fourth one down called the itemized cash flow projection. For those of you that are new and haven't heard me speak before, this is by far the most important and the most impactful report in Naviplan, because what this report shows is every dollar of cash coming in for the entire plan and every dollar of cash going out for the chunky years in the plan that you choose. So this allows me to see everything that's going on, because Naviplan is a cash flow based software. Everything is calculated with cash flow. This report right here shows me the calculations of the entire plan, helps me figure out if there are if there's something I entered incorrectly, or if there's potential my client has that I just haven't looked at yet. So anyways, let me open up the itemized cash flow projection and I'll explain how this relates to the savings strategies that we have entered into the plan here. So before the report generates, I am prompted to choose any chunk of years in the plan that I want. This report can generate up to 10 years at a time. So I can generate it for this year until 2030, or I can go all the way until John and Janet pass away. That's these red dots right here. I can see their cash flow in 2060 if I want. So in a matter of seconds, I can pull up something like this and see a glimpse of what their cash flow is going to look like. But for now, let's just look at 2023 through, let's say, 2027. All right. So this is the report that pulls up, and a lot of numbers when you first look at it, but it's not too bad when you kind of break it down. Essentially, what this is showing is every cash inflow. That's where my mouse is highlighting right now, that top part. And then down here, these are all of the cash outflows. So all the cash going out. Cash outflows are expenses, mortgage payments, insurance premiums. But in addition to that, savings into accounts are also cash outflows. So that's something that's notable to be pointed out. So John's RSP savings, Janet's RSP savings, and Janet's TFSA savings, that's all cash going out. We can see that here. Here is the amount that they're saving to those respective accounts in 2023 and then in 2024 and so on, year after year. So that's a cash outflow. Keep that in mind. So what I mean by that is, let's say Janet's TFSA. Let's say she wants to contribute an extra $1,000 per year to her TFSA. Well, that's going to make John and Janet's cash outflows go up by $1,000 because it's $1,000 more of cash going out, going into the TFSA. So that's one way to look at savings in Naviplan. The savings are uh, labeled as cash outflows. That's how the calculation works. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit here, but still kind of staying on the topic of savings here. Let's look at this bottom line right here, the surplus and deficit line right here. So what Naviplan aims to do is it aims to match cash inflows with cash outflows. So whatever your client's need is, Naviplan matches or tries to match that need by having the same amount of inflows. If there are more inflows than outflows, aka more cash coming in than cash going out, you will see a surplus, which in this case, my clients have a surplus every single year. $6,000 in 2023, $7,000 in 2024, and so on. This is the extra money right here. Okay, so Naviplan's logic with this surplus is, if I don't do anything with this surplus, like me, Justin, the advisor, if I don't tell Naviplan to do something with this surplus, this $6,200 is going to be wiped out of the plan completely. It's not going to be saved automatically. It's not going to be spent anywhere. Naviplan is going to assume that the client spends this money, the $6,000, and it will not carry over to the next year. It will not be used in any way. So what I want to show you is how you can use surplus strategies to do something with those surplus funds. Because again, they're going to get wiped out if I don't touch them. So keep in mind when you're looking at this report, look at that surplus line and determine, what's best for your client to do with that surplus. So one thing I can do with my surplus here, again, $6,000 is the amount in 2023, just for our example here. I'm back in the strategy section right here, and I can go up to the very right tab called surplus. And then here I have a couple different strategies I can do with the surplus. I can save the surplus into an account. I can use the surplus to pay an additional principal payment towards a liability, or I can just allocate it towards an expense, whatever I want to do here. But in this case here, let's say that I want to show John and Janet saving their surplus, okay? What I want to do here first is this drop down is choose an account. Now, only non-registered accounts and TFSAs will show up here for surplus savings. So keep that in mind. Let's just say the savings account is what we're going to save that surplus fund into. Now I can tell Naviplan what percentage of the surplus is going to be saved into the savings account every year. Now, this is where I kind of go back and forth with advisors a lot on this part of it, how much of the surplus should be saved. Obviously, it's up to you, the advisor, and kind of up to the client on what they're comfortable with saving. But realistically, I don't think 100% is a good number to put here, because in real life, if I tell John and Janet, hey, you have a $6,000 surplus in 2023, I highly doubt they're going to save every single dollar of that $6,200 surplus. You know what I mean? Like they're people too. They're going to spend some of it. They're going to do whatever with it. So let's say maybe half of it. I'll put 50% right here. Maybe they'll save half of their surplus into the savings account, and the other half we'll just assume is being used elsewhere outside the plan. We're not going to use it for anywhere else in the plan. So I have 50% of surplus being saved into this joint savings account starting this year, ending at retirement. Now let's go back into our itemized cash flow projection and see how that looks. So I'll regenerate that report for the same chunky years that we saw before. And now look at this. So towards the bottom here in the outflow section, we can see surplus savings. And then the savings account is where the surpluses are being directed towards. There's 3,100 this year, and the other half of it is just remaining surplus that I can, again, use for something else if I want, or just assume it's spent. In this case, I'm assuming this is spent, so it's just going to be wiped out of the plan. So again, every year here we see surpluses being saved in the savings account, and the other half is just being spent, wiped out. So keep an eye on your surpluses, because if your client has a large surplus, that can open up a new conversation with them. Hey, you have all this extra money, what should we do with it? And on the flip side, maybe it opens up a different conversation with them, like, hey, client, you're showing a $40,000 surplus this year. Are you not telling me something? Are you spending money somewhere and you're not telling me? So there's a couple different conversations you can open up with this singular surplus line right here. On the flip side of that, any deficits will show up in parentheses down here. So if there is more cash going out than coming in, you will see a deficit on the bottom here. That opens up a completely different conversation with your client. Hey, client, are you spending more money than what you are making? That kind of thing. That's where you kind of put your advisor hat on and determine where they should be changing things and adjusting things to make those deficits go away. Spend less money, whatever your strategy might be. We'll talk about implementing strategies more in a couple minutes here. The last thing I want to talk about on just general savings here, and I'll delete my surplus strategy just for the sake of my report looking more clean. The very last thing I want to talk about here is I'm going to go back to net worth, go to accounts, and I'm going to add a new account. And this new account is going to be an RDSP. I want to briefly talk about how RDSPs function with savings into them in Naviplan, so there's no confusion around that. RDSPs were implemented in Naviplan, a year ago, maybe a little bit less than a year ago, last winter, something like that. Anyways, though, when you're in the details of an RDSP, you can obviously add a savings strategy in here. Now, the owner here, that's the savings that is coming out of your client's personal cash flow. So if John is the owner of this RDSP and I put in a $5,000 monthly savings into this RDSP, that's coming out of John's personal cash flow. If I would put a savings strategy in this other line right here, the savings would still apply to the RDSP. However, it would not come out of John and Janet's cash flow, because Naviplan is assuming that this other line right here means that the savings is coming from someone outside of the plan. Maybe a grandparent is saving into their grandchild's RDSP, something like that. So that's the first part of it. The other part of it is, with RDSPs, Canadian law only allows $200,000 to be contributed to it over the course of the plan. So let's just give you an extreme example here. I'm going to put a $10,000 monthly savings strategy into this RDSP. Now, with $10,000 a month being saved into this, after 20 months, my client would hit the $200,000 threshold that Canadian law allows. I can't contribute more than that. Naviplan knows to automatically stop this saving strategy once that $200,000 has been hit. So in other words, if I have $10,000 a month being saved in here from today until retirement, several years down the road, Naviplan will stop this saving strategy after 20 months when that $200,000 is met. Okay. Now, the last thing with this is, with RDSPs, obviously there's the CDSG and the CDSB. So the Canadian government bonds and grants that are contributed into the RDSPs, those are calculated by Naviplan automatically and are automatically contributed. So don't ever manually put in CDSG or CDSB in RDSPs. It's all done for you. It's all contributed for you. You should only be entering savings that your client is saving out of their own pocket into the RDSP, or someone outside the plan who's contributing to it as well. So wanted to quick mention that about RDSPs before moving on, so there's no confusion there. So that's kind of the spiel here about savings now. Now let's talk about a couple different strategies we can implement and a couple different reports we can look at here. Now, I'm gonna again one more time go back to my itemized cash flow projection. And the reason I'm pointing this report out so much is because this is like the central report in Naviplan. Every other report you see in Naviplan, every output you see ties back to this itemized cash flow projection in some way. Okay. Maybe you want to see, why is an account running out of money? I can run an account report and ties back to here. We can see when the account runs out in the itemized cash flow projection. So that's why every webinar I do here, I spend so much time in here is because this is the central report that everything revolves around. This, what you see on my screen here, that's the calculation of my plan here. It's a cash flow based calculation. Everything is being calculated right in front of your face right here. That's how everything works, okay? So when you're building a plan in Naviplan, you should be checking this itemized cash flow projection every 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure you're on the right track and just to get an understanding of what's going on in the plan. So if you want to add this report as a favorite, you can. I already added it as a favorite, but up here on the top, it'll say add as favorite. So when you do that, this report is easily accessible in quick actions by going to reports and then favorite reports. Now my itemized cash flow projection is in my favorite reports. It's easy to access, okay? So let me open this up one more time, and then we'll talk about some different reports. But again, they all kind of tie back to this right here. So I'm not going to say anything more on surplus. We talked about that. Surplus is a great conversation opener with your client because it can open up a lot of different opportunity with them. So I guess one other part with this report that I just realized too, that I wanted to mention before moving on here is when I look at the report in this level with 10 years showing it here, the one thing that sticks out to me is in 2030 here, we can see that all of a sudden there's a massive surplus compared to what we saw earlier. Now, why is that? And again, this is why this report is nice because I can very easily see the reason why the surplus is so large in those subsequent years after 2030. It's because look at this right here. The mortgage gets paid off. Right now, the mortgage is being paid $30,000 per year every year, but in 2030, they pay off the remaining amount of it. And after that, there's no more mortgage payments. So the mortgage payment stops. There's $30,000 extra money that my clients are not spending here. That's why we are seeing such a large surplus right here. So what can we do about that? Well, let me show you an example of an alternative scenario we can create because we have all this extra money now, and now maybe my clients are more comfortable saving more into their accounts. This goes back to our conversation about savings. So again, 2030, very large surplus begins, and after that, lots of large surpluses because there's less of a mortgage payment. Now watch what I do here. I'm going to go to Analyze Goals, okay? And then I'm going to go into an alternative plan. So this middle shaded column, right, this blue shaded column in the middle here, this is the exact same as the current plan as it stands right now. Nothing has changed in here. Nothing is different in here. This is an exact copy of the current plan as it stands right now. Now, what I can do is go in the edit button right here, opens up an expanded window about the plan here. Now, everything I do in this plan is unique to this one scenario. So let's say in this scenario, I say, hey, in 2030, when the mortgage pays off, you have a lot of extra money, John and Janet. What happens if in 2030 you start contributing more money to your retirement accounts? Will that help you out for retirement? Because look right now, they are not on track for a successful retirement. They're close to 100%, but they're not quite there. So I'm trying to figure out, me as the advisor, I'm trying to figure out what I can do to help get that number from 98 to 100%. We already saw that they have a lot of extra money coming in starting in 2030. Let's do something with that. So what I'm going to do is go to strategies here. And then here we're in our saving strategies tab. So here I can edit saving strategies. I can make new ones. So let's say Janet's TFSA. let's play with that one here and see what happens. Janet's TFSA, I want to override this. Again, right now she's paying $250 a month into it until she retires. What if she stops the $250 a month monthly savings in 2030? In this case here, let's say December 31st, 2029. So the day before the first day of 2030. This $250 a month will continue until the end of 2029. Now what I'm going to do is add a new savings strategy for her TFSA to start in 2030. So I'm going to say that this starts January or January 1st, 2030 and goes until retirement. This new savings strategy, I'm going to put in max right here. So what I just did here was I said, yep, Janet, go ahead and continue contributing $250 per month into your TFSA until the end of 2029. Then in 2030, when you have more money, let's start contributing the maximum allowable amount into that TFSA. Again, starting in 2030, ending at retirement. And look, just from doing that right there, they are now at 100% goal coverage for retirement. We see that right here. So it's small stuff like that that you can be using the itemized cash flow projection for to see, oh, they have extra funds, let's move those somewhere. Oh, let's implement this strategy, see how it impacts the plan. So again, 100% goal coverage compared to the current plan. And at plan end, their net worth is going to be about $100,000 higher, almost $200,000 higher. So it's something you'll want to show your clients like, hey, this is the value of my advice that I'm giving you. That's the power of this page that you see on my screen here, Analyze Goals. You create those alternative scenarios and then you show your client the impact of your decisions. Essentially, any variable in the plan can be manipulated in these alternative plans. So if you want to show your client downsizing their home or retiring early, again, saving more, paying extra money towards their mortgage, any of those strategies that you want to implement and see the impact of, use Analyze Goals here and build a scenario and you can compare it side by side there. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a couple different reports outside of the itemized cash flow projection. Let's say I want to take a look at my client's taxes in retirement. Taxes are very, very important in retirement, as you all know. So I'm going to show you a report here that relates to taxes that I don't see used very often because I think a lot of you don't know that it exists. But once you see what I'm about to do here, I think you'll see the power of this report. So right here in our income tax category of reports, we have the total tax graph. So it's the fourth one down, second from the bottom. This report right here shows me a visual of my client's taxes for whatever chunk of years in the plan I choose. So what happens here is when I select total tax graph, now I'm prompted to choose the start and end years for the report to display. I can start today, end in 2060. I can start whenever I want. In this case here, let's look at just retirement. So the start date, I'm going to say first to retire. The end date, we'll say last to die. So this report will generate when the first client retires and ends when the last client dies. I hit OK. Now check this out. So this is a visual of the client's taxes in retirement here. Now, what stands out to me here is that taxes are pretty steady here. They're pretty steady here for most of retirement. They jump a little bit here, not a big deal, but they're pretty consistent. But then all of the sudden in 2058, they like spike, and then they spike even more in 2059, and they go up from there. So as an advisor, I don't like seeing that. We don't want more taxes later in retirement. We want less if possible. So here, I'm saying, hey, John and Janet, this is not looking perfect right now. What can we do here to be more efficient? What kind of strategy can we implement to be more efficient with your taxes in retirement? Now, going back to my comment earlier about how every report here ties back to that itemized cash flow projection, if I'm looking at this and I see, oh, okay, pretty steady, but then all of a sudden a big spike in 2058 and then 2059, I can go back to the itemized cash flow projection and see why is there a spike these years. So again, 2058, that's where the first spike happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the itemized cash flow projection and see what's causing that spike. And again, 2058 is when it happens. So let's just look at the report from 2057 through 2064. Okay, that chunk of years later on in the plan. Now, when I look at this here, yep, taxes show up on the bottom, and we can see, like the report we previously saw showed, yep, taxes are pretty low here. They jump here and jump even more here. Why is that? Well, let's go up here on the top and look. The TFSA is being liquidated prior to 2058, but it runs out of money. Look at this right here. We see all zeros. That tells me that the TFSA has run out of money. So there's no more of that tax-free income coming in. Now the only income is coming from the RIFs and the CPP and OAS, which is all taxable stuff, right? So that's why taxes are going up. There's no more of that TFSA money coming in. And if I really want to confirm that this TFSA is out of money right here, what I can do is go into quick actions, go to reports, net worth, assets, and then single asset summary. So a 4-step prompt here to open up the single asset summary. And now I can filter this report to show just Janet's TFSA. I'll just show it for the next 50 years, not 580, 50 years. And now we can confirm, yep, look, it runs out of money in 2058, just like the itemized cash flow showed us. So my point with showing you all of this is going back to my original point of the itemized cash flow is a central report for everything in Naviplan, but these other reports within quick actions will just help confirm it for you, that kind of thing. So this is a nice report. We can see when the account ends, when it runs out of money, how it grows over time, that kind of thing. So going back to our total tax graph here, again, report that is not used a lot, but it's very nice once you know how to use it. We want to figure out how can we limit those taxes later in retirement and potentially have lower taxes later in retirement and maybe the more taxes earlier in retirement, okay? So what can we do differently? Well, let me show you what I did here. I'm going to exit out of this report, go into my Analyze Goals section here. I created a second alternative plan right here, okay? This right here. I hit the Edit button, and I said, what if they pull from their accounts in a different distribution order than what they're planning to right now? The assumed distribution in the current plan is non-registered accounts first, TFSA second, and registered accounts third. What if we change that order and move those accounts, the account order around to have taxes at different points throughout retirement? How I did that was in this alternative plan, I went to retirement, then went to liquidation order, and then I overrode the default order that's used in the current plan. I hit the view/modify liquidation order button. And what I did was I said, let's pull from Janet and John's RSPs first, top of the list here, the investment account third, but then Janet's TFSA later in retirement, and also their savings account, which will have no tax because I've had the cost basis match the market value. So these are the less or the no tax accounts later in retirement and the more heavily taxed accounts earlier in retirement. So how does that look? Well, upon first glimpse here, I can already see this is a positive change because the goal coverage for retirement is 100% compared to 98 right here. And the end of plan net worth is slightly higher at plan end. So that's the first glimpse of this being a positive change. Now watch what I do right here. This is where this tax graph is very impactful. I'll pull up the total tax graph one more time for the current plan, not my alternative plan I just showed you. This is still the current plan before any changes, before my intervention. Now, watch this. Duplicate this button right here. I hit this. Now I have a second report, which is right now a copy of the current, but this report on the right here, I can filter the scenario and show it or have the report show the different liquidation order scenario that I created. Now, before I look at this, I have to hit refresh. But now look at this. You can see the difference here between the current plan and my alternative plan that I created. Currently, they are paying more and more taxes as retirement goes on. With my recommendation, change in that liquidation order, look at this. They pay less and less taxes as retirement goes on. So this is something that I think your client will want to see. If I'm your client, if I'm a client of an advisor and my advisor shows me this, I'm not going to go shopping to a different advisor. I'm going to stick with them. I trust them. That's the power of doing this kind of thing in Naviplan. Not only do taxes go down in retirement with my recommendation, but in the current plan, if I hover my mouse right here, the total tax peaks at $134,000. But with my recommended plan, the highest amount of tax they pay is $90,000. So not only are they paying less tax as retirement goes on, but the largest tax amount that they're going to pay in a year is significantly less than what they had before they even came and talked to me. So any quick action report that you use in Naviplan will have that duplicate button in there so you can compare those reports side by side. And you can see the comparison of the current plan versus any scenario that you choose. If you have 10 different scenarios, you can compare any one of those to the current plan or any other report that you want. Okay, so let me start wrapping up here. And at the end, I'll real briefly talk about a few new features. Then we'll see if there's any questions I can answer at the end. One more thing on reporting. Let's talk about RIFs, RRIFs, real quick. So when I go into the itemized cash flow projection, I promise this is the last time I go into the itemized cash flow. Let's look at the itemized cash flow from say 2052 to 2061, just a large chunk of years. So we can see that the John and Janet's RSPs have converted to RIF at this point. So we can see these are the RIF payments coming out every year. But when I'm looking at this, I can't really tell if these RIF amounts are just the minimums or if it's the minimums plus some more payments on top of it. I don't quite know. So a strategy to kind of figure out what those RIF minimums are is I can go into quick actions, go to reports, go to cash flow, and not the itemized cash flow projection, but the detailed cash flow projection. This is the exact same report as the itemized cash flow projection. The only difference is that the labeling on the left-hand side here is slightly different. So the numbers are the exact same. The labeling is different though. So look at this right here. We have an RRIF payments line and an RRIF payments minimums line. So these right here, these are the RIF minimums for John and Janet. But then we can see here in 2058, not only are they paying the minimums or are they using the minimums from their RRIFs, but also they're using additional RIF payments to supplement their need in retirement starting in 2058. So this report here tells me, just the minimums are being used for a while, but then eventually the minimums plus more RIF payments on top of that are being used. The very last report here I'll show you regarding this is in quick actions here, in reports, needs versus abilities. And then the very top one right here, retirement income and expenses. The reason I'm showing you this report is because this is the only report in Naviplan that has its own designated column to show RIF minimums. So right here we can see the minimums that need to come out for those RIF payments. This is the only report that has this minimums column for you to see that particularly. So again, that's called the retirement income and expenses. So I covered a lot in the last, 40 minutes or so, but that's how I would be using Naviplan if I was an advisor, is looking at the itemized cash flow projection consistently, going into this analyze goals, creating those alternative strategies, and then comparing those alternative strategies side by side to the base plan. So hopefully that all made sense. Hopefully that was helpful. Real quick here, let me explain a few new things in Naviplan and then just what's to come in the future. And then I'll try allocate a few minutes here for questions if there are any from the group here. So So I think the last time I spoke with you all was 3 months ago, 4 months ago, whatever it was. So since then, there weren't a ton of new features in Naviplan, but the one big new feature is our new alternative investments module. So when I go to the module section here, there's a brand new alternative investments module I can select. So you have to be in a level 2 plan and you have to be using detailed tax in order to use this alternative investments module. If you're in level 1, if you're in a forecaster assessment, if you are in average tax for your tax setting, you will not see alternative investments. You must be in level 2 and detailed tax. So when you select this module, then in the net worth section, we now have this brand new alternative investments box. This is brand new as of 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever it's been. So alternative investments refer to usually investments that like high net worth people have. So private equity, hedge funds, that kind of thing. So as it stands today, what you see in Naviplan today is just the first release or the first version of alternative investments. So we're going to continue to add to this, to build onto this, but right now, this is the first version. So when I add an alternative investment, private equity is my only option that I can be adding. We're going to add to this. So a year from now, this will look a lot different, but we're going to be adding installment notes or notes receivable in here. Hedge funds are coming, and maybe 2 or 3 more like commodities or something like that. But right now, private equity is all that's available. More to come in the very near future, but this is what we have right now. When I add a private equity investment, I can go into the details of it, and it functions pretty similar to a normal account functions with a few differences in the data entry here. So right here, you're putting in the units. So how many private equity units does John or Janet own? And then what's the price per unit? Again, putting in random numbers here. Based on what I put in for units and price per unit, the estimated value of the private equity is automatically calculated, okay? So with this private equity, I do have the option to exclude this from AA. What this means is, let's just say this private equity is all in Canadian large cap equity. Okay, I'm just making up an asset class weighting here. If I don't want this private equity investment diluting or skewing my overall asset allocation for my client, I can exclude this from AA. So only the other accounts will show in the asset allocation. The private equity will not be in there. It won't skew the asset allocation pie chart. It won't dilute it in any way. So we have instances where maybe a high net worth individual has private equity in real estate and they don't want their pie chart of asset allocation having a large chunk of real estate when that's not how they want it shown or seen. Each person's different. But anyways, you have the option to exclude from AA if you want. Otherwise, if this box is unchecked, then it'll be included in the client's overall asset allocation. Committed capital, that is the amount of funds that the client has committed to contributing to the private equity investment. In most cases with private equity, the client agrees to contribute a specified amount. So whatever that specified amount is, put that in here. The called capital is the amount that has been contributed to the private equity fund as it stands today. The uncalled capital is the remaining amount that needs to be contributed. Contributions are entered right here in this tab right here. I can add a contribution and put in whatever the amount is. The contributions can never exceed the uncalled capital amount. So once contributions hit this $900,000 uncalled capital amount, Naviplan stops that automatically. That's how that works. Equity redemptions, that redeems units. So if I do an equity redemption right here, that's going to pull and lower this units number right here. On the flip side of that, distributions, that will pull from the estimated value of the private equity, which in turn will lower the price per unit. So equity redemptions pulls from units, distributions, that lowers price per unit. So kind of flip-flop there with those two. Return rates, just the return rate and standard deviation on the private equity, similar to how any other account or any other thing in Naviplan is. And finally, fees. So fixed fees, that's the same as any other account. You can add whatever fee that might be. The variable performance fee, this is the new thing with this feature here. So I can put in an annual fee amount right here and a hurdle rate. So what this means is, let's just say this private equity is making a 7% rate of return. This hurdle rate is 5%. So any portion of the return over that 5% hurdle rate is going to be charged a 20% fee. That's how it works usually with private equity. So again, the 2% over the 5% hurdle rate is going to be charged at 20%. That's what the variable fee does here. And any more information you want on this, use the guide button up here. There's more information in there, but just wanted to point that out quickly. I'll stop here for questions in a second, but that's the big thing that came out in the last few weeks. Moving forward, we don't quite have our 2024 roadmap built out yet, so I don't know exactly what's coming in the near term versus long term. All I know is that alternative investments are going to continue to be built upon. So now you know, play around in that, and hopefully it's a nice new feature for you all. But Vanessa, I'll turn it back to you, and I'm not sure if you have questions or not, but we have some time here if there are any.
Awesome. Always such great information that you go through. Every time I feel like I learn something new, Justin.
Appreciate it.
There
Thank you.
are quite a few questions coming through, so I'll go ahead and start with the first one that came through here from Derek. Now, I think we're just seeing a lot of changes that could be a possible change to an alternative plan,
Mhm.
and it could be overwhelming for some members. So,
Mhm.
is there kind of a recommended amount of changes that you would suggest doing in an alternative plan?
So I don't have a recommended amount of changes, but my answer to that is if you want to keep track of your changes, I recommend keeping track of your changes because we have some people who do 50 different changes in an alternative plan, which is fine if it makes a difference with the client. But if you're not tracking what you're changing, it's useless. So my tip for that is within the alternative plan here, I'll go on this alternative one, use this notes button on the top right. When I click notes here, now I can put in my own manual notes. So today, October 26th, changed savings into TFSA. And then, you revisit the plan 5 days from now. Oh, maybe then you lower their expenses. So keep track of all the changes in here as you make them. And you'll know that you have notes in here by the star icon right here. So short answer to the question is I don't have a recommended amount of changes to make. It's whatever is going to help the client the best. But whatever you do, keep track of it in the notes up here.
Perfect. Thank you, Justin.
Mhm.
The next question here is from Philippe. Can we change the scale on these charts to keep the same values on the y-axis? And I believe they're referring to the total tax graph that you were showing earlier.
Yeah, so the total task graph cannot be manipulated or changed at all. It's static. So what you see on the X and Y axis is well, you can change this axis right here. You can filter it by the years that you want. This axis right here, you cannot change at all. That's just going to be populated automatically. This bottom axis right here, that is all varied on the start and end date we choose here. So if I choose plan year, that's this year until last to die and refresh this. Now this axis is a lot larger and shows a lot larger chunk of the plan. So that's how that works.
Perfect. All right, we'll move on to the next one here. The next question is from Carrie. In the liquidation order, I noticed you had one RSP and then another RSP lined up. Is there an option to have 50% from each RSP rather than liquidating one entirely and then the other?
So the only way around that is, let me explain liquidation real quick here. So if I would change this dropdown to be registered first, then TFSA, then non-registered, what Naviplan is going to do is it's going to pull from both RSPs together in proportion to each other. The only way Naviplan pulls from just one RSP and then just the next one is if I actually hit this button right here and go in here and modify the liquidation order like this. If not, if it registers first, it's going to pull from both of them in proportion to each other. The other part to that is I can choose blended withdrawal right here, and I can choose to do a blended withdrawal. So maybe I do like 50% from registered, 10% from TFSA, and then the remaining 40% from non-registered. If this is the case, then the two registered accounts, the two RSPs, are pulled both at the same time in proportion to each other. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Perfect. No, I think that was a good explanation of it. Okay, we'll go to the next question here. The next one is from Tyler. Is there a timeline for adding FHSA to Naviplan?
There is. I don't know the timeline though. It's been talked about a lot on our end, and I've been pushing for it. That goes back to the fact that we just don't have our entire 2024 planned out yet. But yes, they are coming, and yes, we're fully aware that like it's a thing in Canada. So it's coming, just don't know when. So can't answer that right now. Hopefully next time we talk, so next quarter, maybe I'll have an answer for you, but right now, don't know.
All right. The next one's from Michael regarding another account. You mentioned RDSP was added.
Yep.
How about our ESP? I believe that is incorporated into Naviplan already if we just want to show this member where that's located.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm going to net worth, going to accounts, and then when I add a new account, hit the drop down right here, and our ESP is second from the bottom. So we do have our ESPs in here fully. Yep.
Excellent. All right, the next one is from John. If someone has multiple RIFs or TFSAs, etc., do you recommend adding each account in the new worth tab or just putting it in the grand total? For example, their RIFs as one account and assigning an average rate of return withdrawal rate across all RIFs.
My recommendation is to individually list each single one. That way, if in real life your client is pulling more from one versus the other, that kind of thing, then you can kind of make that more clear in Naviplan. And just for reporting purposes, you can show your client too, like here's your RIFs, here's all of your individual accounts. So I always recommend individualizing each account rather than lumping them into one number.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Just a few more to go through here, Justin. So we have another one from Derek here. Do you have any recommended modules to select for any plans created?
So just in general, I'm assuming any recommended modules?
I think so. There's nothing more to the question, so I think in general.
Yep. So no, that's fine. So retirement, that's like the main nitty-gritty of Naviplan. Like that's what everything is revolved around. So retirement, almost always you'll want to have that checked. Monte Carlo, you might want to have that checked most of the time too, so you can run the Monte Carlo analysis to determine the client's probability of plan success. So I think in pretty much every plan, you do retirement and Monte Carlo. Everything else is subjective to the client. If they're not talking or not worried about education, don't check it. If they don't care about their asset allocation, don't check that. If they don't have a private corporation, don't check that. But short answer is retirement almost always and Monte Carlo almost always. The rest of them are subjective.
That's a good rule of thumb. All right, there's a couple more here. This one's from Jeff. Can we set up Naviplan where it pulls the maximum to a TFSA coming from a non-registered automatically? Is there a way to do that automatically?
If it's pulling the maximum from a TFSA or if it's contributing to it, I'm guessing it's contributing. So
I would assume contributing as well.
let me check here if it does allow that. So to do that, I would have to go to retirement and then transfers. So let me just take the investment account. That's a non-reg account, add transfer strategy and destination account. Yes, so TFSA. So you can transfer from a non-reg account to a TFSA. I'm in the States, so I don't know the Canadian rules, but Naviplan will allow you to do the entire amount of the non-reg account into the TFSA. So I'm not sure if that breaks any rules in Canada. Again, don't know. I'm in the States, but Naviplan will allow you to. So yes, you can do that.
Perfect. We have one more question here that's a bit more lengthier, so I think I'll go ahead and send that one over to you, Justin, after the call because we are at the top of the hour. But last question here from Carrie. Are you going to be doing a webinar on showing insurance strategies, or maybe we could possibly do that in the future?
I'd be happy to next time. Yeah, I certainly can. Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, we'll take that feedback and we'll incorporate that into the content for our next webinar coming up in the next quarter of 2024.
Yeah.
With that said, because we are at the top of the hour, I think I'll go ahead and close it out there. I just wanted to thank you again, Justin, for joining us here. It's always a pleasure, and I know that all of our members get a lot of information from these sessions, so it's really nice to have you come join us again and explain everything.
Mm, mm.
And thanks so much, everyone, for attending this webinar. I hope everyone has a great day, and I hope to see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.